Judges have now entered into the redistricting war. Now, this is a war that you'll remember started with Texas and California, and it since then has spread out to a slew of other states, both red and blue. But yesterday, a panel of 3 federal judges in Texas blocked that state's new GOP-favored House map from being used ahead of the upcoming 2026 midterms. And their reasoning? Well, the judges said that they found it was likely racial gerrymandering. So what does this mean for Texas, and what does this mean for the wider battle as a whole? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Matt Carpenter. He's the director of FRC Action and an expert on this redistricting battle. Matt, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jody. Great to be with you.
Okay, so let's talk about this Texas decision. How did Texas Governor Greg Abbott respond to the court's ruling?
Yeah, swiftly and decisively. Just hours after this ruling was handed down from the district court, a 3-judge panel ruled 2-1 against Texas's maps, and Governor Abbott came out, like I said, hours after this ruling dropped, denounced it, said that the claims of the court that this was racially motivated were erroneous, and pledged to appeal to the Supreme Court. So, you know, the mid-decade redistricting cycle we're in was always going to be litigated, and it seems like we've arrived at that stage now where the courts are going to have to weigh in.
Wow. It's amazing that we're dealing with this. So what does all this mean, Matt, politically, as we wait for the decision now from the Supreme Court? What's going to happen in the meantime?
Yeah, Jody, you mentioned in your remarks in the beginning, it was a great point that it's a red and a blue state phenomenon here, this kind of unique mid-decade redistricting cycle we're in now. And a lot of states are kind of waiting in the wings, trying to figure out which way this is headed. I think whatever comes from the Supreme Court, if they decide to take up this case, is going to have enormous ramifications for some of the states that are making overtures that they're going to redraw their own districts. Florida is looking at redrawing their districts. Indiana it's kind of stalled, but they're looking at it as well. So, and you've got blue states like Virginia and Maryland that are also looking at redistricting, and there's potential for even more in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned Indiana stalling. Tell us about what's going on there.
Yeah, recently the Indiana Senate leadership came out and signaled that they actually didn't have the votes to go through with this redistricting push in the state, despite pressure from Governor Braun and the White House. They were looking at potentially going after 2 Democrat seats in the Hoosier state. But despite that, it looks as though they may take up redistricting when they convene for the regularly scheduled session. So I guess the concern was they were not able to get the votes during a special session, but we'll see if maybe with some additional time, once they convene in January, perhaps they'll have the votes needed to look at their maps again.
All right, you mentioned several other states. I know Virginia, you mentioned Florida, Maryland. Are they all waiting for the court decisions now, or or some of them still trying to press forward? What's the posture in these other states looking like?
You know, it's a pretty unique thing. Each state has their own sort of labyrinth of constitutional requirements and statutes around redistricting. The situation in Virginia is there's basically no room for error. If you look at the course of action that the Democratic-led legislature there has taken, and they have got a new governor coming in, Abigail Spanberger, who's a Democrat, they have to pass a constitutional amendment this session with this governor. He won't have to veto it, but then they have to come back next session and pass an identical constitutional amendment, get it on the ballot before their spring primaries, I believe, are in April, and get it passed. So they have a series of events that they can't miss any one of those deadlines in order to circumvent their constitutionally required bipartisan redistricting commission. The situation in Maryland, as you mentioned, they're one of the blue states that are considering redistricting as well. It's a little different there. They have a Supreme Court that's been loaded up from former Republican Governor Larry Hogan, And so I think the political calculus from Democrat Governor Wes Moore in that state and the Democratic leadership in the legislature is that they're not likely to get new maps past that Republican-dominated state Supreme Court. Nevertheless, Governor Moore is pushing through with a redistricting commission. So he's trying to circumvent the legislature even. So each state is different. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been clear that they're going to look at their maps, potentially redrawing 3 or 5 Democrat districts more in the GOP direction. So we'll have to see how that plays out. First week of December, they're going to be back in session, and the expectation is that they're going to proceed with new maps.
I just hate to see the courts having to get pulled into all of this. It ought to be left to the states, as the Constitution says, but here we are. So less than a minute left, Matt. The U.S. Supreme Court is also looking at several southern states, in particular, Voting Rights Act. Is this just going to throw more chaos into the midterm elections?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I think if Louisiana succeeds in their case against the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, Jody, you've got about 19 districts that could be impacted by that ruling. That could potentially drag in other states like not just Louisiana, but Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and even some other districts in Florida could be on the cutting board as well. Wow. You might see this redistricting battle can extend even further.
Matt Carpenter, Director of FRC Action, thank you for this incredible update. We appreciate it.